There are many Street Fighter games that most of the community had appreciated over the years, and some that they have not. Many games and crossovers that have been remarkable pieces gaming royalty. And then there is Street Fighter 3. Have you ever wondered why this game, even though it had a high favorable following in Japan, managed to do poorly in other countries? Well, we did some research, and it really comes down to very specific details, as why a game such as Street Fighter 3 wasn't as attractive as their other counterparts, like Marvel vs. Capcom or the Street Fighter Alpha series. What made this game so unlikable? Without further ado, let me welcome you to the Street Fighterverse. Street Fighter 3 had a couple of reasons on why it wasn't so popular. One of the reasons lie on the fact that other gaming platforms were also emerging and gaining high amounts of attention. Gaming franchises like Tekken and Virtua Fighter were beginning to take fame, mostly on the fact that 3D gaming was beginning to take popularity at the time. 3D at the time was new. It brought a fresh era to the gaming scene. People were really getting into that aspect of the video game. In a statement made by Capcom heavyweight Akira Akiman Yasuda, he states, and I quote, "Virtua Fighter had already come out by that point, right? I mean, there was no way 2D graphics would win against that. If we were going to beat Virtua Fighter, we had to make something that would go down in the annals of gaming history. I knew it was a battle we weren't going to win, but we had to fight it anyway." Akira Akiman Yasuda is famous for creating most of the cast in the Street Fighter games, which brings me to my next point. Most of the creators of the game didn't have the experience or the know-how of working with fighting games at the time, as stated by Shinichiro Obata, head planner for the Street Fighter 3 game, and he states that the thing about Street Fighter 3's team was that, surprisingly, even though it was Capcom, which was known for fighting games, 70% to 80% of the team members had no experience making fighting games. Why that was the case, I honestly have no idea. But there were people in the team who were quite inexperienced. I think more than half of them, mainly the planners and programmers, weren't really familiar with fighting games at all. By this point, a lot of the old guard, the people who had worked on street fighting games beforehand, like Street Fighter 2 co-planner Akira Nishitani, had already left the company. And even amongst those of the older Street Fighter games who were still around at Capcom at the time, most of them were not on the Street Fighter 3 team. They had all the know-how, but they were all on Street Fighter Alpha team. And the Street Fighter Alpha team and the Street Fighter 3 team never really shared much information with each other. So by the time I came around, the team didn't really have a very clear concept of what to do with the game. They had created a lot of animation patterns, and they wanted the hits to feel like they had a real heft behind them, to make it look cool when you took damage. But the problem was the team had no idea what kind of mechanics should go into the game in order to make it an interesting fighting game. There was no plan for that, and there weren't enough moves for each character. So I ended up joining the team when the game was in that kind of state. Most of the old team were gone. New designers and programmers were introduced to a franchise they had very little experience on. From the start, everything seemed to be a complication to the franchise. Another aspect in the demise of the Street Fighter 3 game is the whole concept of the new generation. The majority of the new characters threw people off. As stated in an interview, it states that one of Capcom's boldest decisions for Street Fighter 3 was to drop most of its established characters in favor of a new cast led by a new main character, a wrestler named Alex. While Capcom reversed course on producer Sadamoto's initial idea to release the game as a new intellectual property, the game still ended up with 10 new characters alongside Ryu and Ken, shifting the balance considerably. This proved controversial, both because fans were disappointed to see their favorite characters missing, and because the new cast didn't resonate with players in the same way as the original roster. It is said that Street Fighter's main designer, Akira Akiman Yasuda, didn't have a lot of creative output in this game, as he states in an interview saying that, on previous projects, I had a lot of input on how the characters were envisioned, but on Street Fighter 3, Sadamoto's opinions were obviously a very big driving force on how the characters were eventually designed. I wanted more freedom, but I couldn't veer too far from Sadamoto's characters' designs. In most of the games I'd been involved in, people came to me for guidance on the designs, but Street Fighter 3 was Sadamoto's show, so I was relegated to brushing up his original designs. I remember being there to put pressure on the team to do good work, For some of the characters, I would set the basics of the design early on. I would give the team directions and so forth, and they would kind of take care of things on their own. When there were certain parts of the design that weren't going well, I would step in and maybe fix up a few things, but I didn't really have such a concerted involvement in the game. We got to remember, as stated before, this is basically the guy that created Chun-Li and Ryu, and they closed him out. Another aspect was the graphics. The graphics weren't as good as Street Fighter Alpha. The arts and designs were unappealing to the masses. Other small aspects of the game was that a lot of people thought that the parry system the game had designed was very difficult. This feature of the game withdrew players who were focused on the simpler aspects of the game. This system was simply too difficult for your average gamer to understand. Street Fighter 3, even though it didn't appeal the masses like we would have wanted to, we considered the game to be a great game. We think that the timing of the game and the absence of its original creators left a void in the success of the game. It reflects that even though the game was decent, it just didn't push out to be what it was meant to be. So, do you agree with the Street Fighter 3 being an unpopular game? Let us know in the comment section down below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell to stay up to date on new theories and info. Thank you for watching. This has been your Street Fighter host. Welcome to the center stage, our new Discord server. There you can talk with us, chat about current events going on in Street Fighter, information, theories, and lore. We'll leave the link in the description box below. We want to thank everyone for tuning in and becoming part of this Street Fighter community. We want to thank you for your positive comments towards our channel because it only habilitates us to grow even more. From the Street Fighterverse crew, we thank you.